Welcome everybody to All Even Live exclusive. I am Barrington Grant, host of the All Even podcast. This is Mike Guido, host of Guido's Gridiron Blitz. That is Matt Cataruzolo down the bottom. And here we have our guest, our mentor, our teacher, formerly of SB Nation, formerly of SportsMap Radio, Joe Spano.
Yeah, they don't know what their name is this week. It could change by tomorrow. So by the time this comes out, it could be a different name.
Welcome
but
to the show,
in my time there, it was Yahoo Sports Radio, it was SB Nation Radio, and it was SportsMap Radio. At today, whatever day and time this is, it's SportsMap Radio until further notice.
That's right.
Welcome to the show, Joe. How are you, man?
Man, I'm doing okay. I'm recovering. I'm on the back nine of the recovery from COVID-19, but
oh wow,
most of the effects are gone now.
Okay.
Most of the effects are gone. It was a rough 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, the intense nausea, the lack of any energy. And when I say any energy, I mean I was sleeping 12, 14, 16 hours a day. I could barely keep it together to watch the football games. Forget about watching a basketball game. So I had like a week and a half where I didn't watch any sporting event other than what was absolutely necessary because all I did was sleep. I did lose 20 pounds. That's good news.
Hey,
there's a positive.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. I'm a guy who didn't lose weight during chemo cancer treatment. So I managed to lose weight during COVID. So COVID knocked 20 pounds off. So there's some shirts that I couldn't get into anymore that I can. But we're on the back nine of that. The energy's starting to come back. The appetite's starting to come back. And I'm starting to come back. So all is well, and I'm kind of enjoying these last few months of what I like to call semi-retirement. And we'll see where it goes from there.
That's right.
Okay. So, Joe, take us back to, how you got started in the sports broadcasting field. You have an interesting story, and we would love to hear it. So,
well, like every gangster, I didn't want a real job. So I decided to sports business. Actually, I was a successful insurance agent, and I didn't enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. There were some elements of it I enjoyed, the personal interactions and whatnot. But on a day-to-day basis, while financially it was successful, going to work every day was a misery. I hated going to work every day. And that can weigh on you. For a lot of people, sometimes it can be enough because of the economic benefits. It wasn't for me. So I needed to find something else because I was still young. I wasn't even 30 yet. And I'm like, I can't do this because, I'm going to be working for at least another 20 years. And I could not even think of continuing to stay in the insurance industry for another 20 years. And like so many of us in this conversation tonight, I heard an advertisement for the Connecticut Schools of Broadcasting. Can we say their name here?
Yeah, absolutely, we can.
All right. Connecticut Schools of Broadcasting, nation's oldest and largest group of broadcasting schools. In months, not years. They'll give you a career you've always dreamed of. Hands-on, learn by doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's right.
So I heard the ad. I went to a studio tour like many of you in this conversation did. And the next thing you know, I enrolled in classes. I graduated from the first evening class in in a very early goings in Westbury, and the rest is kind of history. I plied my trade all over this country. I started out doing part-time local work. Then I moved around the country, then came back a little more than a decade ago back to New York, and the focus of my energies was on national radio. And that's really been the focus of my energies ever since as a national sports talk radio host. And, COVID having the effect that it did on many of us took, in essence, 2 careers away from me at once within a matter of a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
First, the school was shut down. The plan was to reopen. They did not. And then not long after that, SB Nation, SportsMap Radio, had their budget cuts. And we all know about that, Mike. The incredible budget cuts that they've undertaken, unfortunately, have left both of us without employment on a full-time basis in the traditional broadcast media, which
right.
For me, this is the first time for that in almost 20 years.
Yeah.
I basically, I had some hiccups along the way, and that's normal when you do things the way I do it. But in essence, I was basically a continual paid contracted employee of some form or fashion for a radio station or a national radio network for close to 20 straight years. COVID changed all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, COVID absolutely destroyed our industry, Joe. And what was it? I heard this crazy number of like 40% of our entire industry at the beginning lost their job, or at least got furloughed, or something. Like a massive number of people lost their job in our industry. Obviously, me being one of them, and you being another one. But the interesting part about it is that after the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, obviously, you were a teacher for me and for Barry. So we understand what that program was like.
Does Matt feel left out? Because I didn't teach you, Matt.
No.
You don't feel left out?
That's fine.
Thought by me. All right.
It's okay.
You didn't miss that much. Nobody learned that much. We had a lot of class, but nobody learned.
Very little.
Yeah, it was a complete waste of time. I'm totally kidding. But we understood also what the job turnout was. And, I know for me, I graduated Connecticut School of Broadcasting in, I believe, September of 2017, if I'm not
That's correct. No, I do remember that. It was a red letter day for us.
And it was about maybe a year and a half or 2 years where I finally got my first job, right? Like that was when I got my first job in broadcasting. How long did it take you after you graduated, after you made the career switch, did you find your first job?
I was fortunate because there was more local small market Long Island radio.
Right.
There were stations like WLIE out on Long Island where you could get a job. And that was my first gig. My first true gig on air where they were paying me was doing weekends on WLIE radio following Long Island Ducks baseball.
Right.
That was the first get paid gig. Then, because I was in a position where I could actually leave New York to pursue this, I was able to send out a demo of some of this work. Working 2 nights a week, you had enough of an opportunity to accumulate and put together a demo. And then I was able to put together a demo and go move all the way across the country and start my career on a true full-time basis from the standpoint of doing 5 shifts a week, plus doing play-by-play and everything else that went with it.
It's the dream.
Yeah. I mean, it is. As I told every one of my students, and I always thought I made, during the studio tour process, the enrollment process, class time, immediate postgraduate, all the way through, I said, if you love sports, love talking about it, and are looking to get into an industry full of long hours for really bad pay, you're in the right place. I never promised anybody this was going to be easy.
Right.
And that right out of the box, you were going to be at the fan making tons of money and being this constant on-air presence. What I promised you is if you work really hard at this, you'll have a lot of fun doing it. And at some point along the way, financial fortune may find you. I was lucky enough to have that, and it has allowed me to basically have this semi-retirement without having to, don't get me wrong, I'm digging deep, but I don't have to go stock shelves somewhere. I don't have to go back to the insurance industry. I can kind of just hang back and assess my options. But this is not an easy industry.
No.
But the rewards are great when you're allowed to do what you love. When you're allowed to just do this and have some fun and enjoy this, this is a great industry. Unfortunately, there are changes in our industry, Mike, and we both know this.
Right.
Our creativity to a great degree has been stifled more than ever by management within this industry. And it makes it very difficult sometimes to continue to want to do this because, yeah, I can talk nuts and bolts sports with anybody, and I think all of you know that. Right. Anybody that's had an extended conversation with me knows that I can go from breaking down route combinations that are being run by NFL teams, and in the next minute I can talk about oral sex. And I can do them both with the same level of aplomb and expertise. And, and for years, PDs love that about me because they said, well, we never know what he's going to do. It's different. Yeah, we're going to get some complaints sometimes, but at least we know they're paying attention. Now it's like, oh, well, we got complaints. We can't back you. We can't have this. And everybody sounds the same.
Right.
And so here's what you get now on every show you listen to. You get, okay, you'll get breakdowns, you'll get analysis, you'll get the strong opinion, and every once in a while somebody gets angry about something. But other than that, you get nothing. There's no laughs anymore. There's no profound thought where you go, boy, I never thought of it that way. It's just everybody does the exact same thing, and there are no stars being made, and there's nobody that's any different than anybody else. Everybody doing the same thing all the time. And that's what can be frustrating. But at its worst, our industry is better than having a real job. I promise you that. I've had those too, and those are the worst. Ask your dad, Mike. He has a real job.
That's right.
He's got a very real job.
I remember when I went to my studio tour, and I'm sure you remember this, Joe, because I think he might have even told you. He was like, listen, I'm here to enroll my son, but I want to go.
Right. And I do remember that. And, your dad was great, but here's the truth of it. You make sacrifices. You make a lot of sacrifices to enjoy a career in this industry.
Right.
I've left a trail of fiancés all over this country. Well, not all the breakups were because I was just a complete a-hole. That was some of them. But some of them were quite simply because, well, my family's here, my life's here, I'm not moving.
Right.
Well, I got to go because if I stay here forever, I might run you through a wood chipper. So I got to go for the good of my career. So you can either come with me or, well, you know how this is going to end. And, that's how it usually ended.
Right.
I guess I'm fine to be engaged to if, you're in your town where you grew up. But, who's going to move across the country with me? And, some of these places you're going to are not that great. They're really not that great. They're not these wonderful places to live. So.
Yeah, doing afternoon drive in Cheyenne, Wyoming might not be as glorious as people think it is.
Doing it in Mobile, Alabama wasn't all that glorious either.
Right.
Trust me. It really wasn't. You talked about the same thing every day. And unfortunately, Alabama and Auburn weren't that great at that time. Alabama was okay, but they weren't great. Now doing sports talk in Mobile might not be so bad. Alabama wins. They lose one game a year at the most. And, whether it comes during a regular season or at some point during the college football playoffs. But you could talk about Alabama football every day, sprinkling a little bit of Auburn, you'd be okay. But when they're 9-3, it's just not as much fun.
That's right. Right.
And you can't talk about anything else because
that's all they care about.
Baseball. They really don't care about the NFL. They'll let you sprinkle in a little Saints, but they don't really care in any significant way. So you basically talked about the same two things every day, Alabama and Auburn football in some form or fashion, because they didn't care about the basketball teams. They hardly cared about the NCAA tournament, didn't care about Major League Baseball at all, hardly cared about the NFL, NBA, NHL, et cetera, et cetera. So it was very singular focused, and you had to find ways to keep it entertaining, and I managed to, with my combination of football, being able to talk football, being entertaining, making people laugh, being the outsider. I found a way to make it all work. I always played up on I always played up on the outsider aspect because I didn't sound like I was from there. It was one of the things they noticed very quickly.
Yeah. Before Matt, if I could just ask one more question, and then I'll throw it over to you. But because you brought up Mobile, Alabama, and I know somebody that came from Alabama who's now obviously the big star, even given his age and everything like that, is Paul Feinbaum. And the way that I always remembered him was he did something kind of differently in Mobile, Alabama, and it obviously worked for him. It was, you brought up, you needed to talk about the same two things pretty much every day because that's all those people cared about. And he kind of let the listeners kind of dictate the show. He took a lot of calls. He talked to a lot of people, and it wasn't really much conversation. It was just letting the listener talk. All right, we've got Sally here. And then, okay, hang up. Sally makes her point. And then she, he brings on somebody else. That's how Paul Feinbaum claimed his success. Now, obviously, his show is a little bit different now, but did you sense that you were doing some of the similar things when you were in areas like that?
Absolutely. Because, and all they wanted to talk about was that. Obviously, you watch and or listen to Feinbaum's show now, and because of the SEC network, it's got more of an SEC, more of a broad SEC focus.
Correct.
But
right.
in the time that you're talking about, those earlier years, it was take phone calls, and we know what they wanted to talk about. Auburn and Alabama and Auburn in that order.
Right.
That's what they wanted to talk about. And you just followed the trail and tried to make it fun and tried to have a take and tried to push some unique buttons. And with me being critical of any of the local teams because of the outsider aspect was what always got the show firing up a little bit, because it was basically at that point, go home, Yankee, go home.
Right.
As soon as I said anything bad, as soon as I said anything bad about Alabama or Auburn, they got all over me. And it would get testy and heated sometimes, because the realities were they didn't want you picking on their beloved local teams, and they especially didn't want to hear anything bad from me.
Right.
That was just the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Joe, it's interesting to hear such a refreshing take on the journalism world. I'm a senior right now at Stony Brook. My major is journalism, and when you enroll, they sort of put you on.
I hate to cut you off.
No, sure.
As a journalism major, can you afford lighting? Because you look like you're sitting in the Bat Cave.
It's always weird because I have a dimmer, so if I put it like a notch up, I'll be like right there. But if I put it here, it's like bearable. So if I adjust like the brightness on my laptop, it kind of fixes it, but not really. So
not really. Let's go with not really, because you look like you're hiding out in the Bat Cave, or you're in the witness protection program or something. You want it?
Yeah. If I look like a silhouette right now, I'm sorry. If I look like someone who's
that's all right. We're all having fun here. Right now, it's at your expense. It's just the way it goes. It's that way sometime. I didn't mean to interrupt your question. I'll let you pick it up.
No, yeah, go for it. So it's when you enroll in the journalism program, they usually put you on two tracks, whether it's print or it's broadcast. And now in such a fading print journalism world, I was obviously inclined to elect to go broadcast journalism. And now with everything so digitally oriented, on top of everything of COVID putting everything online, it's refreshing to hear your perspective on how sports radio and everything is such. You're not going to be you're not going to be rich from it, but you're going to have a great time doing it. So it's refreshing to hear from someone that's actually in the industry like you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the truth of the matter is that is something you have to keep in mind when you go into this. Because if you're a bright enough kid to go to Stony Brook, there are probably a lot easier ways for you to make a good living in life than getting into the sports media business. But if you love this and you want to be happy, and you could carve out that niche for yourself, you're truly living the dream. Because I've always said this to my students. The only parts of the business I ever disliked were the business part of the business. Once I get on the air, I'm having a time of my life.
That's right.
I've always said that. Once it's time to go on the air, I've always had fun. Those 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever it was, that was always fun. Everything that went on before, afterwards, in between, that's not always so much fun, whether it be dealing with program directors that just don't get you, whether it be dealing with the next contract, whether it be dealing with incompetent producers, and everything in between. These were all real issues. But once the light went on and it was like, okay, you're on the air, Joe, go, then it was fun. Then it was fun. Those 3 hours, those 2, 3, 4 hours, they're a blast. There's nothing better than that. And the way I used to get out a lot of my frustration with what went on before I went on the air was I would just bring that up on the air. If my producer screwed up, I embarrassed him on the air for the entire show. If I was having problems with management, I would bring it up on the air, which was another thing they didn't like particularly. They didn't like the airing of grievances on the air. If I'd complain I wasn't getting enough airtime, I wasn't making enough money. I did all kinds of crazy stunts. There was a point where I had members of the audience send money in a promotion. I had them send money to the network basically to get me back on full time when I was just doing weekends. I said, take an envelope, address it to Craig Larson, program director, SB Nation Radio. I gave the address out on the air. We would play the Save the Children music. And I said, if you put something, you could put something that jingles, something that folds, whatever it is, just send something to program director Craig Larson at SB Nation Radio as part of the Get Joe Spano Back on Weekdays fund. And I would do these things, and eventually there'd be stuff trickling into his office, and I'd get a phone call like, can you do me a favor? Can you stop doing this crap on the air? It's really messing up my day when I'm getting, $3.75 worth of mail to put you back on the air. I said, okay, buy yourself coffee. Stop complaining. So, I was different. I was offbeat. I was unusual and always will be. And I tell everybody this. If you're unwilling to get fired, you're unwilling to do this.
Right.
And, because if you're going to play this safe, you can't go anywhere. You'll be stuck because you'll just sound like everybody else. There's a million guys playing this safe and just kind of doing the same thing. Me and Mike used to talk about this all the time, right? I'd say, tune in SB Nation Radio for a while. Force yourself, endure, listen. I said, I said, listen. And one of the things I said, take a listen. Do you notice every show sounds the same? They all talk about the same thing in the same way, and they all sound the same. And outside of the fact of them telling you who they are, you got no idea who's who. And it doesn't really matter. They're all doing the same show.
Right.
So I said, you're a unique guy. In addition to all that knowledge, you're quick-witted, you're smart. You can leg press a hell of a lot of weight based on our pre-show conversation. So
I really wasn't trying to gloat. I was just having an honest conversation about working out.
Yeah, but, so, and I told Mike, I said, be you, be different. Be the one and only Mike Guido. And make sure you don't sound like anybody else. And, I know Mike's listened to some of my work, and he can safely tell you that I don't sound like anybody else you're going to hear.
Yeah, it's
my
very
show
unique.
is offbeat. It's unusual. You never know what's going to come next because I don't always know what's going to come next.
Right.
I do a little bit sometimes of an unhinged show.
Yeah, it's a very open template with you, Joe.
Right.
It's
and that's
really
open
open
my
template.
way. And again, I in this day and age, it may not make it the easiest way to go. It isn't.
Right.
Because it causes a lot of aggravation.
It can.
And you're always kicking yourself, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But you know what? You go back and think about it and say, well, that's what makes me me.
Right. Right.
And there you go.
Barry, you're up, dude.
Well, Joe, I definitely have a big question for you. Do you think that personality will come back into radio at some point? Like, obviously
That's a tough one.
We're in this like sensitive, time where everything is just hyper analyzed and you can't say this, can't say that. Like, do you think that at some point we're definitely going to get back to that personality where people can just be themselves?
I wouldn't count. I'm not confident of that.
Yeah.
I'm not confident of that. Unfortunately, we've gone very sanitized. It's, and again, Mike knows the KD stuff he was talking about and the oral sex stuff that I was talking about. I never used any word that would be deemed a fireable offense. I stayed clear of, something that you couldn't use. I was very, when I do these kind of racier topics, I'm also very careful on my language.
Right.
And, and for years that always kept it to, Joe, we really wish you wouldn't do this stuff. Make some kind of apology, whatever. And, I would always make some kind of whatever. We'd move forward, or I'd get suspended and we'd come back. Now, everything is hypersensitive. And I get it. Sometimes there's families listening. I never promised my show was a family show. I never did. I never promised that I was doing family radio.
No.
And so that's kind of the deal. I'm not sure real personality-driven radio is going to come back. You're going to be able to sprinkle some personality in there, but it's going to be very sanitized and very safe.
Yeah. Yeah, radio's definitely, just as an industry, there aren't, I don't think that there's anybody in the industry now that's more popular and probably has more personality than Howard Stern. And you told me you've always told me this, and obviously Joe and I share an agent, and he tells us this also, is Howard Stern can get away with things because he's Howard Stern.
Right.
Like
very true.
There's nobody else in the industry that could say the things that Howard Stern does and not either get fined or get fired.
Right.
Like it's just
not now.
Yeah,
of course, right.
You can't say that, I idolize Howard Stern and I want to be just like him. No. You can't get away with it.
You can't be just like him.
You can't do that.
Now, again, as far as what you're talking about, Barry, it's like you can say that Howard Stern is the reason why you get into radio and people aren't going to get, but if you try to do a Howard Stern segment, right, where you try to talk to porn stars on the air and everything like that, it's just, it ain't going to work.
You can't do that. And I never took it that far because while I was an admirer of Howard Stern, I was never a Howard Stern imitator because I was kind of doing a different show. I was doing sports.
Yeah, right.
But, if anybody that knows me knows that the guy you hear on the air is the same guy you hear off the air. I'm a little irreverent, I'm quick with a joke. And sometimes they can touch on some touchy topic matter. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. But to go on the air and be somebody other than me doesn't make for very compelling listening because you get that from somebody else.
Right.
Like, have you ever tried to do a censored show, and how did you feel doing it? I'm sure it must have been the worst radio you've ever done.
Yes, absolutely. When I got the lecture, if you're going to stay here, you're going to really have to clean it up. It was this horrible radio. It wasn't me. I didn't enjoy it. I don't think the audience enjoyed it. And I don't think they were getting anything special. They were just getting whatever.
Right.
And when you start doing this for the paycheck, that's when it's time to not do it anymore. And that's what, and sometimes you get forced into those situations. And I'm just, and then I just said, hey, for better or worse, I got to do this as me.
Right.
If you decide that we can't work together, well, so be it. We can't work together. Something will come up. Something always has. I've never been on the beach for this long in my entire career. But as Mike pointed out, I'm not alone. Half of this industry is now on the beach because of COVID-19.
Right.
At some point, once we're clear of COVID, things are going to open up because organizations are going to have to open those purse strings because it's only going to take one. And then you start competition because now instead of just putting on content and making sure to make it cheap content and let's make a profit, somebody's going to start saying, hey, we got to put some dynamic content on. And then their competition says, yeah, we better put some dynamic content on against them. And then it mushrooms out from there. It may take a year. It may take 2 years. I don't know how free the industry is going to be. But at some point, I do believe that this industry is going to return, even on the terrestrial side. But I think what's going on here today with on-demand content, podcasting, and different things like that, something I was never a huge believer in other than as a way to get your feet wet, I think is now going to in many ways become the wave of the future. and where irreverent and talented and creative personalities can do their thing.
Right.
And do what they want to do, be creative, and also generate revenue.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that the industry is going to end up going in that direction also. So let's get into real stuff. Let's get into
Oh my God,
sports
all
stuff.
of this, we never even did any real sports yet.
We never did any real sports. We're a half hour into this damn interview. We haven't done one.
And we were wondering if we're going to run out of stuff to talk about. I don't think we're going to have a problem.
I don't think we're going to have a problem either.
Unless Barrington's he's going to take a major edit knife to this and cut it down to like.
I'll cut it down like 5 minutes.
You can get this down to 5 minutes? You're a better man than me. But whatever you got to do, whatever you got to cut out, go ahead. Let's get into sports.
I'm not cutting anything out. It's going wrong.
Well, I'm going to step away for 1 second. I got to get some water.
All right.
I got a little COVID throat here, so hang in there a second, guys.
But I think Joe's right, guys. Yeah. I really do think that. Look,
100%.
So, and this is the way that I've always looked at it. You know, I guess in recency, like Joe Rogan is gonna be that next guy.
Yeah, he's gonna be the next Howard.
Like that's the next big thing. But you're even seeing again a lot of these bigger hosts that are going to be doing the same thing that Joe was just talking about. Is a lot of these guys are just going straight digitally.
Oh yeah,
and teaming up with iHeartRadio and people and just streaming podcasts. Right there, everything's going up on Spotify and it like.
Record it, have it on demand, but also stream it live. You see it. Dan Lebertard's doing it now, and people that were with his show decided to go with him instead of staying with ESPN. You see what Clay Travis is doing without Kick the Coverage and everything associated there. You see what Mike's doing with Landry Football, with the Guido Gridiron Blitz, rolls right off the tongue. You know, you're seeing it everywhere, and I think you're going to see more and more of those. And when guys like me and others get the boot from traditional terrestrial radio, whether it be because we no longer want to pay you, or you're too cutting edge, or you're this, or you're that, instead of fighting the uphill battle to get back into terrestrial radio, they're just going to go digital, and they may not look back, and they may leave terrestrial radio for the guys just breaking in.
Who do you like this weekend, Joe?
All right, let's get right to it. AFC Championship game. Harder of the two to predict because we don't know who's playing quarterback for the Chiefs on Sunday.
That's right.
You know, if Chad Henne's the quarterback for the Chiefs, that pick just got easier. I like the Bills a whole lot in that game because while Chad Henne is a quality backup, I don't think I want him starting the AFC Championship game. Do you?
I think I agree with you.
If Patrick Mahomes is playing and he's 100%, I think the Chiefs find their way in a close game.
He did practice today, limited.
Yes, he was limited. He's been limited, and he was limited in practice. It was little more than a walkthrough. But again, does he ultimately clear concussion protocol? That's the question. You know, if he clears concussion protocol and he plays on Sunday, I think the Chiefs find a way to win this game. I don't think it'll be easy. But I think the difference is, I guess what I'll lean on is the fact that the Bills are so unbalanced. They really don't commit to their run game at all.
No.
And I'm not a believer that, if you have Aaron Rodgers and you've got Drew Brees and you've got a select hand of Patrick Mahomes, another one, if you've got one of 5 or 6 quarterbacks in this league, I think you can win football games on a regular basis, throwing it 50 times and running it 15. I'm not sure Josh Allen is that guy yet. And I don't believe that the Bills can win football games in conference championship games on a regular basis, running the ball 10 or 15 times and throwing it 50. I'm not convinced that's the case, especially not against Steve Spagnuolo and a pretty good Chiefs defense. It's not a great Chiefs defense, but it is a pretty good Chiefs defense that when you allow them to only have to worry about one dimension, just the passing game on again with the opposing offense, I think you're making it real easy for that defense, and I don't think the Bills are going to have an easy time scoring. So if Mahomes plays, I expect a pretty close game, but I expect it to be a pretty close game that the Chiefs manage to win. If Chad Henne's quarterback for the Chiefs, the Bills are going to win the football game. Chiefs
man.
won't score enough.
Yeah, man. I know you have a question.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, bro.
So we'll flip to the other game for the NFC. Do you think that watching the past two games, who has a more motivated sense of, I don't know, I guess pressure between Rodgers and Brady? In your opinion,
as far as motivation, if you ain't motivated on Sunday, you got a problem. You're in the wrong business. I've always believed that finding motivation deep in the playoffs is not hard. So I don't think motivation here, I don't think there's an edge for either one of these guys as it relates to who's going to be more motivated, who's got something to prove. I think this just boils down to which is the better football team. And I happen to think both of these two football teams are very good and very complete football teams. I think the difference is it's going to boil down to that the game is in Green Bay. Easy for me to say. The game is in Green Bay. And I think that's going to be a huge difference in this one. And that's where I think one of the big edges is.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Joe. I think the fact that, it's in Green Bay, I think Tom Brady will be fine because, listen, he played his whole career in Foxborough. He knows cold. But we're talking about the other guys. Like, are they used to that type of weather, in January? Are they used to, not being able to run those particular routes? Or if it's a cold day, the ball is going to be a little heavier, a little harder to catch. So, we're definitely going to see what they're going to be about in that game. But I definitely have Green Bay winning that game. I think Aaron Rodgers is just that good this year. He's taken his crown back. Everybody was talking about last year, in a new offense. Oh, he didn't look that great. He didn't have a Aaron Rodgers type year. Year 2 in the offense, he looks just like Aaron Rodgers. Year 3 in this offense, he's going to look even better. So, everybody just I think they kind of read him off a little too early. I think that Green Bay has the best team left in the playoffs right now. And I really don't see any other team beating them, to be honest.
Well, when you look at this game and you look at the two respective offenses, they're both pretty high. They're both high-powered offenses. Tampa Bay really late in this year has really found a deep passing game to latch onto. They're doing better with their running game with Fournette and Ronald Jones. They're a pretty balanced offense with an array of targets that they can go after. But when you look at Green Bay, they're even more balanced. They now have a 3-headed running back attack that they can lean on. And they can beat you throwing it 50 times because they got Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and complementary pieces in that passing game. But they can also beat you by running it down your throat, led by Aaron Jones. But you got A.J. Dillon and you got Williams. That's a nice trio of running backs behind an offensive line that can grade some road in the running game. So they're even more balanced than Tampa Bay, who is really a pass-dominant offense. Yes, they're getting more and more out of Fournette and Jones, but they're not going to be able to run it 30, 40 times to win. They have more of one formula to win on offense, and that is to throw the football. And I don't know what the weather's going to be like in Green Bay on Sunday. I don't know if it's going to play a huge factor. Is it going to be extremely cold? And the cold, as you said, it won't affect Tom Brady, but it may affect Mike Evans, who don't play much in the cold. It may affect Chris Godwin, who doesn't play much in the cold. It may affect Ronald Jones, who's dealing with a bad finger and a bad quad and doesn't play much in the cold. It may affect Fournette, who doesn't play much in the cold. So I like the versatility of Green Bay's offense and being used to those conditions, and I think that gives them an edge. Defensively, I think both of these teams are really good, especially Tampa Bay. They could stop your run game. They can go get after your quarterback, and they do a pretty good job of covering on the back line. If they have an Achilles heel on their defense, you can gash them for big plays in the secondary. Green Bay can get after it, rushing the quarterback. They're stopping the run. It's just a very balanced and solid defense. So when I kind of put it all together, I just see a couple of more weaknesses in Tampa Bay in comparison to Green Bay when it comes to versatility and balance. Home field, I think weather-wise, is going to play a factor. And I think for those reasons, I like Green Bay in a close one.
You know, when it's really cold, Joe, I think it's understandable to say that it's really hard for 43-year-olds to get loose.
Absolutely.
Right.
See, that's definitely fair. Absolutely. Guys like Gronk, who's not 43, but older, he's going to have trouble getting loose trying to run patterns. Brady trying to get that arm loose. I think that's absolutely a factor. And extreme cold, when you're not used to it, makes a football, when a quarterback has hummed it, a little bit harder to catch.
Right.
Cold footballs are extremely hard. And when you throw it as hard as these guys, it's like trying to catch bricks.
Yeah.
So if you're not used to that, that can be a huge factor. Guys like Vontez Scanling and Lazard and Devontae Adams, they're playing in Green Bay and have played there for the last several years. They're used to catching a cold, hard football from Aaron Rodgers. It's an advantage. It's a factor. That's where the cold comes in. I agree with you wholeheartedly, Mikey.
There's also a lot of penalties on that side of the football, Joe, for Tampa. They get flagged a lot. Do you think that there's, and again, and this is with a Brady-led team too, and we've known in the past for the last 2 decades that, you know, Brady-led teams are relatively disciplined. This doesn't really happen all that much. But this Tampa Bay, especially on defense, this Tampa Bay defense, there's a lot of penalties that fly around the field when they are on the field. So,
and that's a huge
discipline is a part of
that could be the kind of thing that extends drives and everything else, Mike.
You can't give that to Aaron Rodgers, man.
Right.
You just can't. You
can't give him second chances. And big defensive penalties that extend drives at key spots could be the huge difference. You know, we've talked about this in the past. Not all penalties are created equal. If those penalties that they commit are those kind of drive extending penalties that result in points for Green Bay, that's a huge factor in this football game.
What do you got, Matt?
That's true. And looking at the Tampa Bay defense in particular, it's filled with a bunch of young guys like Devin White. Antoine Winfield Jr. is another player I like a lot. Shaq Barrett, who's actually a guy that I'm hoping my Giants can look at in free agency. So building off of that, I noticed in a series of your tweets, I feel like they're inside my own head because I think about this stuff all the time. And this one in particular, you say Darren Waller is what Evan Ingram is supposed to be. I couldn't agree more. And furthermore, when I look at Giants offseason plans, do you think that if a player like Florida's Kyle Pitts is available at their 11th overall pick, do you think that he's a direction that they should go in, despite the fact that they do have Ingram, who has all this potential?
Well, I'll say it like this. It depends on who else is there at 11. But Kyle Pitts would definitely be an option at 11. And depending on how it fell, if the Giants chose Kyle Pitts at 11, I wouldn't be upset at all. Because I'm kind of hoping the Giants decide to divest themselves of Evan Ingram before the new league year and before his $6.5 million fifth-year option becomes guaranteed. Because that's not money well spent. The Giants need to create some salary cap space if they're going to go play in free agency. And $6.5 million on Evan Ingram just isn't good business. I understand the 4'4", the 6'4", 240 pounds. It's tantalizing. I get it. But it's like dangling the carrot. It's tantalizing, but when's it going to come to fruition? When is he going to be Darren Waller? It's been 4 years now. And not one of those years has he given you anything that resembles a superstar tight end. He's had drop problems. He's not a good blocker. His route running is average at best. With his skills, with his physical ability, he should be way more open than he is. So the realities are $6.5 million for, boy, the guy's got a world of potential. Just doesn't work for me anymore. It's 4 years in this league. I know what he is. Let him go. Take that $6.5 million and invest it in one of the other places where you have needs. whether it be bringing back Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson, whether it be going and getting a corner, whether it be going and getting a number one receiver. These are all things the Giants have to address, and some of them are going to be addressed in free agency because they're not going to be able to address them all in the draft. So I'd free up that $6 million, and if Kyle Pitts is there, I might look at him.
Right. I imagine after the season, before next season begins, they cut at least Golden Tate, maybe Zeitler, possibly Solder, and allocate that money elsewhere. I completely agree.
I think they have to. Kevin Zeitler's a hell of a guard, but he's not worth $12.5 million. Now,
Right.
And he's on the wrong side of 30, although for an interior lineman, that's not necessarily old. Mm-hmm. Could I see them doing a restructure with Zeitler so it's not all kids on the offensive line? Yeah, I could. I could see them spreading that down or cutting him and re-signing him. But Golden Tate's not part of the future. Nate Solder, unfortunately, opted out due to COVID, and now you have to kick that contract down the curb a year. And when you'd like to free up some money, it's really not as easy. But Nate Solder's not a part of this team next year. Golden Tate's not a part of this team next year. David Mayo's not a part of this team next year. Cody Core is not a part of this team next year. The Giants are going to try and free up $20-30 million by letting go of some complementary players and getting some studs, because they've got to get some more playmakers for this Jason Garrett offense. If there's one thing we know about a Jason Garrett offense, it doesn't work unless it has a number one receiver, and they ain't got one right now.
It doesn't work, period.
Do you
think that's why the Cowboys fired him?
But here, you're a Cowboys fan, Mike. But the one thing we've seen, if you give a Jason Garrett offense a true number one receiver, it works better.
Yeah.
I mean, will we agree there? You can't run all these inside curls and stick routes with a bunch of number 2, number 3, and number 4 receivers. Doesn't work at all.
Right. For
whatever reason, you give a Jason Garrett offense a number 1 receiver, and all of a sudden things start to come together.
Right.
I don't know if that's just because of how valuable number 1 receivers are and what they do for every offense. Because if you ever notice, an offense devoid of a number 1 receiver is one thing. Then once you give that offense a number 1 receiver who defenses have to shade coverage towards, everything about that offense has the ability to change. And when you miscast number 2 receivers as number 1 receivers, that's when your offense goes in the toilet. So you go out and so if you're going to spend money in free agency to get a number 1 receiver, you better make sure he is a number 1 receiver. Not a guy who puts up good numbers, but truly is a number 2 masquerading as a number 1. Right. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
But Joe, do you think that Evan Ingram can be converted into a wide receiver so they can be able to draft the Kyle Pitts?
No. His route running isn't good enough. He's not going to get it. I get it. He's big and he's fast, and those things are nice. But his understanding of route concepts and his ability to run routes make him extremely coverable. Otherwise, he'd get open all the time.
Right.
So taking him and saying, all right, we're going to make him a wide receiver now. Yeah, he's going to be bigger than most outside corners. I get it. He's going to be bigger than most outside corners. But he doesn't run good enough routes. His cuts aren't good enough. His footwork isn't good enough. He's not going to get open against elite outside corners if you turn him into a receiver. I just think, the Giants, while the talent is tantalizing, I don't think this is a guy that understands the intricacies of being a tight end well enough to be successful. Because the realities are, if you can't run routes, I don't care how fast you run, you ain't getting open. And that's the problem with Evan Ingram. His understanding of route concepts, his inability to run good routes does not allow him to achieve the success that his physical skills would say he should have. That and questionable concentration, questionable hands. Not all drops are created equal, just like not all penalties are created equal.
Right.
Evan Ingram drops seem to lead to terrible things happening to your offense. Not just this year. Go look at his career. Evan Ingram drops directly lead to turnovers, end of drives. those drops kill you. The 1st and 10 drop where on 3rd down you end up picking up 1st down, well, that drop doesn't hurt you as much. So all drops are not created equal, and all mistakes are not created equal. Evan Ingram mistakes cripple your team. Plus, again, we talked about it. I don't think he's as polished a route runner as he needs to be in order to get open. So all the physical skills in the world, but if you can't get open and you can't win, what's the difference?
Yeah, that's fair.
And he doesn't win.
Yeah. As we're kind of talking about NFL draft stuff, and we've dialed in on Kyle Pitts a little bit, but Joe, you know how every time draft season comes around, I mean, we talked about it ad nauseum last year with
that's because I was lazy to do any work.
With quarterbacks that are coming out of the draft, and you know how heavily I analyze a lot of these guys. And it really feels like this year, the way it's looking is obviously Trevor Lawrence is top tier. He's in that class by himself.
He's Andrew Luck, right?
Right. He's that sort of prospect. So you got Trevor Lawrence. Then you're looking into the Zach Wilson, Justin Fields ish area. I think Trey Lance is probably somewhere in that conversation as well. And then you get into the Mac Jones and Kyle Trask and all of those other guys. Here's the thing that I really want to ask you, because again, you know how obscure I look at these things. I look for special qualities in players.
You do. I think that's a smart move when analyzing these guys, because if you don't do something special, well, it may not translate to the next level.
Right. So, and that was the complaint I had about Tua, right? Because I didn't see too much special from Tua in college, and I think he's going to be fine in the NFL. I think people.
And I saw more of it than you did, but you could see people's concern. I just don't believe all this hype I'm reading that I'm hearing and reading everywhere that the Dolphins are already going to give up on Tua and trade and draft another corner. I don't think that's happening.
I think that's nonsense, but
I do too.
I think that Trey Lance, and I get that this is, it gets kind of tough because you had players opting out this year. Trey Lance only played one game. But I think Trey Lance is kind of getting a raw deal here. I think Trey Lance is the second best quarterback in this draft. I do. I think it's Lawrence. I think it's Trey Lance. And then I go Justin Fields and Zach Wilson. I'm a little skeptical on Zach Wilson.
Fields. I don't like Justin Fields at all.
Do you really?
I do not. I watched a lot of Justin Fields this year. And I saw a lot of things I didn't like. And again, I'm not going to give you, Ohio State quarterbacks never do well in the NFL. What does that mean?
It doesn't mean
we're going back to guys that were coached by different people in different offenses in different decades. The old Ohio State quarterbacks never do well in the league. It's an asinine statement. So this has nothing to do with the fact that Dwayne Haskins didn't work, that Art Schlichter didn't work, that, and the list goes on and on. What I didn't like is in every big game against truly elite defenses, he came up small. The Indiana game, he was horrible. He wasn't good in the Northwestern game. He didn't have that many opportunities this year, but in pretty much every big game that he played, he came up small. And unless his receivers were wide open, he was throwing picks. He was making bad reads. I wasn't impressed with what I saw from Justin Fields last year. I was much more impressed with what I saw from him in 2019. But 2020 Justin Fields is a guy who gave me a lot of pause about his ability to succeed on the next level.
Now, is it more that you don't like Justin Fields? What do you like about Zach Wilson?
Again, watch some Zach Wilson. Again, the quality of opposition outside of Coastal Carolina was, I don't know how we would describe it. We would describe it as putrid, St. Mary's School for the Blind, CSB Tech, schools like that.
Right.
We threw our best 11 out there and off we went. But I like tantalizing arm talent. See, I just like arm talent. If you can throw the football, if you can make every throw, you got a chance to succeed because that's what football is all about. I think he's a good enough athlete. I like a lot of what he does out there. I just like his arm talent. Trey Lance, I haven't seen that much of. What little I have seen, I think there's some special skills, and I think he's ideally designed to be today's type of NFL quarterback. But I definitely am down on Justin Fields as far as reading defenses, making plays, making throws into tighter windows. What he showed me in 2020 was a real poor compared to what he showed in 2019. I like Wilson. I like Trey Lance. I was pleasantly surprised by Mac Jones. Mac Jones surprised me. Mac Jones, to me, coming into this year, I said, well, this is every quarterback they had before Tua, right? You know, he was a Greg McElroy. He was a A.J. McCarron. I said, you know, he'll be another guy. I understand they got a ton of talent there, but he'll just be another guy. He showed me a lot more than that. He showed a remarkable deep ball, again, throwing into huge windows, and I get that. You know, those Alabama receivers were wide open. But even after the injuries and some of the other things, I was impressed with his ability to throw the deep ball, manage a football game. I think Mac Jones could pleasantly surprise some teams, and if he goes to the right place, I think he could have a pretty good career. I'm surprised. I never thought I'd be saying that 9 months ago.
It did help that Mac Jones had maybe the best wide receiver in college football since Desmond Howard. I think that might help him a little bit, right?
Again, you know, when you're throwing it, when you watch these guys and they throw into these huge windows, you sometimes are going to wonder how that's going to translate in the NFL because those huge windows aren't going to be there.
Mm.
So I don't know, but I was impressed by what I saw because even after Jalen Waddle went down, and now, you know, it was lesser guys. Yeah, you got to lead Hoss, but some of the other guys were, you know, maybe future stars, but not there yet. Right. That offense still kept humming, and he still kept making those throws. So I was impressed by a lot of what I saw at Mac Jones. I'm telling you, I would draft him, but I was impressed.
Talking about a lot of receivers more in this draft class, and last year's draft class was absolutely loaded with, you know, Lamb and Judy and Jefferson. I mean, we've seen what those guys have been able to do. Now, with Devontae Smith winning the Heisman Trophy, I've seen mock drafts that are, you know, taking him as high as 3 overall to the Dolphins. And that might be attributed to the fact that, you know, Jamar Chase opted out, but we still need to remember what he did in, you know, 2019 with possibly the most dominant college offense in the history of college football.
It was until Alabama came along this year.
Right. Right. So who of, I would guess, the top 3 receivers in this class out of Chase, Waddle, and Smith excites you the most?
Well, before the injury, it was Waddle. I got to be honest with you. Before the injury, it was Waddle. And if he comes back 100% from the injury, it'll be Jalen Waddle again. You know, it's like trying to catch a greased pig. He's something else. I mean, we all saw him limping around in a national championship game. There were some routes that they felt he could run. And right up until he ran one, caught a pass, got hurt, and then we really didn't see him much again. We could see he's not ready. But of those guys, if Jalen Waddle proves that he's 100% healthy and gets back everything he had before the injury, I love him of those 3 the most. Again, the other 2 guys, those are pretty good consolation prizes because those guys are going to be stars on Sunday too. But you're going to be able to get stars on Sunday all the way into the 3rd round easily of this draft with wide receivers. So whether it's Jalen Waddle, whether it's Devontae Smith, whether it's Jamar Chase, whether it's St. Brown out of USC, whether it's Terrence Marshall out of LSU, you know, these are all guys that I think are going to be impact players on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. I think people are forgetting how special Jamar Chase is. I'll let you go, Barry. My bad.
No, go ahead, man. I was asking Joe, with the Jets are in an interesting situation, right? I think this is probably the best situation that they found themselves in probably in the last 20 years. So what is your opinion, or, you know, what do you think that they should do? Should they hold on to Darnold and use those assets, use that draft capital to be able to get all these skill positions that they actually need, because they need a ton of holes that they have to fill, right? They have a ton of holes.
Oh, yeah. They've got holes all over the place.
Right, all over the place. Offense, defense, the entire team. Do you think that they should keep Darnold, because they did draft him third a couple years ago? He's not a bad quarterback. He's just been in a bad offense for 3 seasons. Do you think that it's smart to just keep him with the new offensive coordinator, with the new head coach, and just have that draft capital and be able to really change the dynamic of this team going to next season? Because, in my opinion, I think the Jets, the fact that they have the second most money in free agency, they have all this draft capital, they can be able to turn around their team in a year. Your thoughts?
Yeah, they could turn it around quickly.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to keep Darnold. And I've been up and down on Sam Darnold, but I'm not in love with any of these other quarterbacks except for TL.
Right.
If they were picking number 1, we'd be having a different discussion right now. And I'd be bye-bye Sam, hello TL. I'm not convinced on the rest. Yeah, I may like some of these other guys, but I'm not convinced that they're a clear and obvious upgrade over Sam. So with that being said, if it's me, I'm doing one of 2 things. I'm keeping Sam, and I am filling this roster with talent all over the place, and you'll find out what you got in 1 year, because you got to make a decision at that point. Do we pick up his 5th year and everything else? Or I'm trading out of 2 because somebody's in love with one of those other quarterbacks, moving back a little bit and acquiring even more draft capital and filling even more holes because they need help on the offensive line. They need help in the receiver position. They need help in the running back position. They need help in the tight end position. They need help all across the defense. That's a lot of ground to cover. So the more draft capital you can pick up without moving so far back that you're not getting a stud, you got to make sure you don't move out of stud area with your number 1 pick, with your first round pick. You want to make sure you get a stud there. So somebody wants to come up to get a quarterback. You don't want to move too far outside the top 10. That would be my take on it. But I would be willing to trade out of number 2, move back a little bit if somebody wants to come up and get a quarterback to get even more assets. Be judicious but smart with my spending in free agency, and between the draft capital that they've already acquired, the potential for more, and the free agent dollars, the Jets could rework their team pretty quickly.
Yeah, I actually think that they can really be the surprise team for next season if they play their cards right. Because even if for me, if they don't trade out of that number 2 pick, do you think that drafting Penny Sewell at number 2 to really shore up that offensive line, how would that, go with you? Like, do you think that be drafting a little too high for Penny Sewell?
Love him as a prospect, but here's the problem. You're drafting you're either moving Becton to right tackle or you're drafting a right tackle at number 2.
Yeah.
Now,
right.
Neither Becton nor Sewell have ever played right tackle. And it's not as easy a transition as you think, because everything that when you're a left tackle and now all of a sudden you move to right tackle, same thing inside with guard, everything you do is backwards.
Right.
Your drops are backwards, your footwork's backwards, kick step, everything is the opposite. See, if you go back to last year and you go back to the Giants, one of the things about Andrew Thomas is he had played both the left and right side. So he understood and he was comfortable with the footwork on both sides. Neither Becton nor Sewell have ever played the right side. So you're going to have to rework somebody's footwork and expect them to just hit the ground running. I'm not necessarily confident in that. It's certainly not something I want to risk at number 2. If I want to go offensive lineman, drop down a little bit. Darisaw, the kid out of Northwestern, maybe. There's some other options who might give you Leatherwood. These are all guys with a little more positional versatility who it's a lot easier to kick over to the right side, and you can keep Becton on the left side without a problem, and you're not spending the number 2 overall pick to secure the right tackle position on something that now could make your tackles a little more uncertain than it should be after having invested 2 high first-round picks on tackles.
Yeah, a lot of NFL people and a lot of scouts and everything like that say, listen, if you're going to draft a tackle high, you better make sure that he plays left tackle, right? You can't draft a right tackle at number 5. Like you have to draft a left tackle if you're going to spend that much of a premium asset on it.
Top of the second round, go with Leatherwood or something at Alabama. Put him on the right side, or the kid Slater out of Northwestern is somebody, or Darisaw from Vought Tech. I think they all have at least some experience on the right side as well.
Okay. So let's touch on some NFL coaching decisions, right? Some coach hirings. And you don't have to break down every single one, but what's one that you like? What's one that you don't?
One that I like. I like the Arthur Smith hiring in Atlanta.
Really?
I think Arthur Smith is a hell of an offensive mind. And if you watch what he did with Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee, because when Ryan Tannehill left Miami, nobody was impressed with Ryan Tannehill.
Right.
He signed on in Tennessee to be the backup to Marcus Mariota, who nobody was impressed with at that point anyway.
Right.
And the Tennessee offense was stumbling along, and Mariota was stumbling along, and Tannehill takes over. And now people talk about Tannehill as a top 10 quarterback in this league. Well, I get some of that was just Tannehill getting experience. And I've talked about Tannehill a lot over the years. Tannehill did not play a lot of college quarterback. Spent about 2 years of his time at Texas A&M in the wide receiver room because there was no room for him on the quarterback depth chart, and they wanted to get him on the field. So he started about, I think, 15 games, maybe less, in college as a quarterback. Didn't spend a ton of time in the quarterback room. So I knew when he came to the NFL, it was going to take a while for him to develop. Miami didn't really give him the chance. He goes to Tennessee. And all of a sudden, because there's Derrick Henry, a good offensive line, and a nice offensive mind in the offensive coordinator, it kind of comes together. I don't want to take anything away from Tannehill, but I think a lot of that was Arthur Smith and designing an offense that Tannehill could execute well and leaned on Derrick Henry and that offensive line. So I like the Arthur Smith hire. That one impressed me. I mean, is there any of these that I really question? Maybe the Chargers choice. You took
Brandon Staley.
Staley. I understand. Did a great job this year as the Rams defensive coordinator. I don't think anybody is going to take anything away from him.
They overachieved. Yeah, they were good.
Right? But first year as a defensive coordinator. Before that, in the league for 3 years as a position coach? And before that, it was a bunch of years as a college assistant, correct? Or a handful of years as a college assistant.
Right.
This is not a guy who has a lot of experience. He flat out he's only been in the NFL for a very small handful of years, doesn't have a ton of college experience, and merely 1 year as a coordinator. So to me, I think that he was plucked a little bit early. I would have been much more comfortable with a Brandon Staley next year after a little more experience. But I think the reason that a guy like Brandon Staley gets hired so quickly, all these NFL teams, they're rushing to get their coach. They don't want to wait through the hot assistants and the candidates that are now deep in the playoffs. So, guys like Daboll aren't getting a job. Eric Bieniemy's not getting a job again, so on and so forth. Those guys are not getting jobs because NFL teams don't want to be left holding the bag. They don't want to wait. They're going to pounce on to the guy that they think is the best available guy that becomes available by the divisional round. Anything later than that, they're not waiting. Because now if you wait for your man and he doesn't come available till after the Super Bowl or after the conference championship games, you don't get him, you're now on the outside looking in. There's not going to be a quality option for you at all. And nobody wants to start doing heavy hiring at the Senior Bowl.
Right.
Well, because you know what it is. The coach is getting hired out of the Senior Bowl. The Senior Bowl's the market for unemployed coaches. You know, everybody's filled out their staff. I'm what's left. Give me a job. So that's the realities. So I think a lot of times what you're seeing is you're seeing the best available coaches who become available by the end of the divisional weekend. And I think anybody that's not available after that point is pretty much out of the running, whether they're qualified and ready for a hire or not.
It's a good point. I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
These are the kind of things, if I was employed on a full-time basis, you could hear every day.
Joe, I feel like while we're kind of on the topic of head coaching and organizational stuff and all that, I feel like we'd be a little remiss not to talk about the situation, what's going on in Houston, mainly with Deshaun Watson. So I guess just to keep it brief, what do you think should happen with Deshaun Watson, and what do you think will eventually end up happening with Deshaun Watson?
Somebody needs to get down to the Galleria in Houston, buy him a Rolex, and try and make nice with him.
Thank you, Joe.
Here's the realities. What do we always say? And I'm going to throw this open to everybody. What do we always say you need to win in this league more than anything else?
Need a quarterback.
Right? Everybody's looking for a franchise quarterback. And everybody, when they get a chance at the top of the draft to draft a quarterback, they got to get a franchise quarterback. And sometimes they hit a home run, and sometimes they strike out, and they're doing it again 3-4 years later. Well, you've obviously hit a home run with Deshaun Watson, right? Everybody would agree he's a franchise quarterback and one of the 5 best quarterbacks in this league.
Without a doubt.
No question. And has done more in many cases with less, because Bill O'Brien was a bad coach, was a lousy offensive coordinator. And each and every year,
traded away DeAndre Hopkins.
Right. Exactly. And each and every year, Mike, they stripped away another piece of talent from him.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
So there's no disputing that you can win big with Deshaun Watson. You can win Super Bowls with Deshaun Watson as your quarterback. There aren't that many teams in this league right now that can unequivocally say they have a young quarterback that's good enough to win multiple Super Bowls with. So with that being the case, you better make nice with this guy, because you ain't going to get equal value if you trade him. That's number one. And number two, if he ain't happy, he ain't going to be, in some way, shape, or form, he ain't going to be able to keep him there. So you better fix whatever you've done to make Deshaun Watson unhappy, and I think we all know what they've done to make him unhappy. They need to fix it, because you are not going to get the equal value trading away that franchise quarterback. It just ain't going to happen.
Right.
And then you got to go out and get a franchise quarterback. And we all know that that's a 50-50 crapshoot. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's about half the time you hit on that franchise quarterback. So make nice, fix it, and make him happy, and try and surround him with some talent.
Right.
I know you've traded away the better part of your next couple of drafts to the Dolphins, but that being said, find a way to surround this guy with some talent and make him happy, because if you're forced to trade him, you're going to be on the wrong end of the trade.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep. So, Joe, we're just about to wrap up here, but we do ask this question at the end of every interview with every guest that we have. And we're going to try and tally as much of these as we can. Last week, we had Martin Gramatica on, and he said
he had a good answer.
We ask everybody, who is the greatest athlete of all time in any sport? And Martin Gramatica, our first answer was Diego Maradona. So
good.
I'm interested, who is, in your mind, the greatest athlete of all time in any sport?
Muhammad Ali.
I'd imagine we're going to get a bunch of those. Muhammad Ali. All right, we pencil it in. So we have one Diego Maradona. We have one Muhammad Ali. Now, why do you say that, Joe?
Back up my case on Muhammad.
Go ahead.
Absolutely.
The best 3.5 years of Muhammad Ali's career, he didn't box. He was suspended because of his refusal to enter the draft and end up being part of our military. And again, I'm not going to get into the political aspects of that, but I'll get into the boxing aspects of it. Before his suspension, Muhammad Ali was just coming into his prime. And I will point to his last fight before his suspension. If you want to see how good Muhammad Ali was, go watch this fight. Fought a gentleman by the name of Cleveland Williams, who was a damn good fighter, a hard hitter. Fought him in the Astrodome. He made Cleveland Williams look sick. I don't think Cleveland Williams hit him in the entire fight. He just dominated. Then you have that 3.5-year layoff, and what's the first fight? He's right back in the ring against Joe Frazier.
Right.
You know, you have to remember, you look at what Muhammad Ali was, and go back and watch that fight. Watch the Cleveland Williams fight, and watch the clinic he put on. And then watch Muhammad Ali 3+ years later. Inactive, not able to fight, not able to make a living. He's a different fighter, and he was able to reinvent himself. He wasn't quite as elusive. The feet weren't quite as fast. He now became a guy that worked angles, took punishment, and found a way to beat other great fighters.
And those Frazier fights took some years off of his career.
Yeah. I mean, and he exactly. So when you watched a guy lose his 3.5 of his most prime years, have to come back as a different fighter and still be great in a time of great heavyweights. So for those reasons, I think he was the greatest athlete of all time in any sport.
I like it.
We're going to get a bunch of those answers. Muhammad Ali. It's
we definitely may get a bunch of that, man. So, Joe, like I said, it's been great, man. This has been awesome. All Even podcast exclusive. All Even live podcast exclusive with Joe Spano. I'm Barry Grant Jr., host of the All Even podcast. We have Mike Guido, host of the Guido's Gridiron Blitz. We have Matt Cataruzolo down at the bottom, looking pretty as usual. This is it. We're signing off. Thank you, Joe, and we'll see you again.
My pleasure.
All right.